Hello YouTubers, this is Stephanie. I wanted to capture every detail I could on making my fursuit build for the first time. This video includes a few stills, mostly time-lapse, and a few flavor videos for you. What started off as a Halloween project quickly turned into research on fursuits. This is my first build ever and the first time using many of the materials I'm going to show you here. If you followed me on Facebook, you got to see many of my updates and my thoughts and aggravations of some of the materials I used. What you're seeing now is a time-lapse of the molding process. No camera for the sculpting process, but I hope the stills helped give you some idea of the process. This rubber latex mold had about 12 layers in it. 8 and 9 consisted of some gauze reinforcement. And now working on the mother mold. I'm not gonna lie, this part was hard. I didn't totally understand how to do it, but at least it worked. Not to mention how incredibly messy this step was. I wish I had placed them better. It would have made the whole demolding process much easier. You can see my youngest trying to run off with the clay. I'm not sure if it was my imagination, but this second side, oh my gosh, it dried so much faster. I completely lost my separation line and it became a big problem later on. And now you see me struggling to demold this. By the way, the little yellow things are corn cob holders that help hold the clay in place. After a almost disastrous demolding, I sprayed it all down with mold release to help prep it for the mold making process. My wonderful husband here is helping me put Humpty Dumpty back together again so I can get this mold done. Eventually we just said, hey, duct tape. Duct tape fixes everything. I hope to revisit this and make a proper mother mold now that I've learned my lesson. Now this was the scariest part of the project for me, casting. It was another first for me. It was scary due to the limitations of how much I had to work with. I had to pull off 2 perfect masks with only 1 go each. Versus the cost of all the materials I worked with, this stuff was the most expensive and I can only afford 1 container of it. I was able to pull off 2 masks even though I think some areas were a little thin, but I think that was just due to me being a novice with the material. The next aspect that I tackled was the LED eyes. I wanted 3D following eyes. After doing all the research about resistors, voltage, and LEDs, the wiring process itself was actually pretty simple and a lot of fun. And painting them was even more fun. I had so many ideas of how they should look, but after consulting with my kids what the costumes were actually going to be for, we decided just the round pupil and blue eyes and red eyes. You saw me drilling into the resin so I could glue in the LEDs. Seriously, I think I could paint eyes all day and never get bored. There's so many different designs I think would be awesome. After all my research with fursuits, I could claim to the conclusion that balaclavas, I hope I pronounced that right, were definitely needed. They help wick away the sweat, keep your fursuit clean, and keep things comfortable, so they were a must. Yes, finally working with the fur. Cutting it out with an X-Acto blade so I wouldn't damage the actual long pile. I shaved everything down so it looked nice and neat. And then I sewed the actual paw pads with an applique method. It was actually pretty simple, a little bit of research on YouTube, and I had it figured out. The paw pads themselves are actually stuffed. I really like the idea of using fabric for the paws versus using silicone. This made the paws have maximum dexterity and also be nice and soft for high fives. My stepson chose these bright red for his paws. And here I'm working on the tail. Again, the kids helped me figure out the design on exactly what they wanted. I was partial to the husky design, but in the end we went with the long with the curved tip. Not sure if you got to see that. I hope you get to see it several more times in this video, but I used a Swiffer duster to help clean off my desk, and it really helped pick up all the loose furs. I love it. Yes, you get to see me cut out another set of block paws. I only made one set to begin with, including the applique process, so I could test some things out and make sure that's the method I wanted to use. After explaining to my youngest what I was doing, it gave me idea of doing a first-person shot. And here's my attempt at wearing a camera while I do the applique process. What's so great about applique is I don't have to be right on with cutting it out. Just cut out a large piece so it could cover it all and pin the sucker on there. Throughout this entire project, it is so important to get your fur out of the way. After you sew, you're going to brush some more, but making sure the majority is out of the way really helps with the end result. Even during shaving, you'll find yourself brushing out the fur several times to make sure you get everything. During the actual parade, we actually brought a slicker brush with us to basically, just like dog groomers, spruce up our outfits right before we hit the show. And this is the beast of my sewing machine. Nice, old-fashioned metal one. I've repaired several parts on it, but I'm going to have to replace some more, I think. You'll see later on I had to switch it out for my sister's machines because I finally broke the tensioner on this thing. It was going for a while and I really struggled with it, but it became time and evident that yeah, I need to borrow a machine. I don't have time to fix this one. Halloween's around the corner and oh my gosh, save me. And my sister came to the rescue with her two fancy machines you'll get to see later on. My kids actually really seem to enjoy brushing out their costumes as if they were brushing out their own little pets. I found that after a time of ruffling, hugging, and running around, the fur pile would start to gather on itself and look a bit shaggy instead of the nice smooth look we were going for. So I guess rule of thumb, if you're going out for an extended fursuiting experience, carry a brush. I've never been an avid sewer, but I have to admit sewing fur is a lot more fun than sewing prom dresses or repairing clothes. Okay, as you can see, I'm using really tiny, really sharp scissors. After pushing the fur out of the way, I just simply trim off what I don't need. I try to get as close as I can. I'll be using a tight zigzag stitch to help cover the seam. Out of the scrap bin at Hobby Lobby, we found this really cool textured, stretchy almost vinyl that my daughter picked out for the paws. I think it looks really cool and it's really thick too, but actually flexible. Throughout this project, anytime you sew a fur seam, make sure you take your slicker brush and brush out any fur that might have found its way back into the seam. Again, we're going to brush the fur out of the way. We don't want to end up with little clumps, lumps, bald spots. I mean, we paid money for this fur. I want all of it to be nice and poofy and on display. There is so much brushing in a fursuit project, so yeah. The slicker brush I have is actually just a really cheap little one. I mean, there's no need to be expensive with it. Actually, the smaller, thinner, cheaper is probably the best option. And as with the black and red paws, I am stuffing the pads to give a little bit of shape to them. I didn't actually stuff the fingertips. I found that the fur that was underneath that I didn't brush out was just sufficient padding, so I really only had to stuff the actually paw part. Using the stuffing tool that this polyfill came with is awesome. I mean, I can lump it in there and get it with my finger, but it's nice to fluff it around with the stick so I get no lumps. I'm switching my machine over to a tight zigzag stitch. All I'm going to do here is go over the right side of the fabric on the edge over my old stitch and clean everything up with a nice edge. This part is important. You want the stitch to be finalized and look really nice. You see it's on the outside of the paw fabric and everyone's going to see this nice edge you're making. Even though I've taken the time to brush the fabric out of my way of my sewing, as you can see, as you move it around, some of the fur actually kind of moves back into your path that you're going to be sewing. So just take your fingers as you're sewing and kind of just brush it to the side and all is well. As you can see on this paw too, label your pieces. That's so helpful. No one's going to see your writing on that side, so go ahead and mark it all up so you know what you're doing. Here I'm actually pinning the two halves together, and this is actually going to form the glove. Lots and lots of pinning. You want everything to line up great for this. I found that after I added the seam allowance, I still had some fingers that are rather tight. It worked out well for my kids because they have smaller hands, but I think a full-size adult might have trouble wearing these paws. After you get it all sewn, it is time to turn the glove right side out. Sometimes you can really struggle with this. I mean, there's a lot of fabric and fur to push through tiny finger holes. My advice is to use that stuffing tool that your polyfill came with and shove those fingers back the right side out and take your time with it. It will come out looking great. As you're flipping it out, make sure you inspect your seams. With all the different turns and tightness of it, you may find that you missed a couple of pieces, even with all the pinning and everything. So you might have to go through, and I just hand sew it real quick to save time. I really enjoyed using a serger. It made the seams really nice, especially along areas that would be actually against your skin. After sewing the actual tips, I had to trim some fabric back so it didn't bunch up against your fingertips. As with any sewing job, make sure you go everything and make sure all your seams are nice. Wearing paws is surprisingly a lot of fun. I can't wait to make more of these.
I need a haircut, but I'm looking pretty good. Rawr, rawr.
Here's a quick glimpse of me making the foam support for the tail. It's just the insert that's going to go down the center, and that's really going to help keep the tail nice and straight and keep its form. It's going to be rounded out with polyfill, so I didn't make it absolutely huge. I did make the base of the tail pretty big because I wanted it to lay flat against the backside. Here I'm actually doing the rest of the stuffing, getting everything all nice and fluffy, making sure my seams are great. You can see me gluing on the blocks for support for the back side, and I'm actually sewing it closed by hand and then adding 2 elastic belt loops that the belt will actually slide through so your tail has some support. In all my research, it was very evident that this tail support for the loops and the elastic need to be sewn on really strong because the tails get a lot of tugging on. The foam insert actually helped keep the tail and is bringing it back into shape in case it got sat on or folded over or any other things that tend to happen to tails. My kids really enjoyed the tails. In retrospect, I think I wish I made them a little bit smaller. It helped with animation to have the tail bouncing off the back of the legs, but long time use, I don't think it'd be very comfortable. And here's the finished product of just the paws and tail, and with the belts that we have slid through for attachment. After all the crazy casting, I moved immediately into making hinges for the mask. I happened to have a big sheet of plastic that I just cut up because I didn't have enough material to actually cast the hinges myself. I hope to do this in the future. I'm actually scoring the plastic and using this super awesome epoxy glue to actually attach the hinges. I learned from all my research that cutting plastic is much easier if you just use a little bit of a heat gun and then use a knife, and it'll cut like butter. You have to be careful when you heat stuff up because you could actually warp it. This was a really hectic time. My stepson needed to go home in a couple hours, and I had to have him test fitted because I wouldn't see him again until Halloween. There's a small top strap for the top part of the head and then a large band elastic for around the head. There was several fittings that had to be done just to make sure everything would stay fit. I had them shake their head to make sure I had everything comfortable, like added foam to the bottom of the chin and around the head. Here I'm actually working on a second mask, attaching hinges again and gluing, and I actually had a moment to glue in the LEDs into the eyeballs. I didn't positively trust the glue, so I ended up drilling through the mask and the hinges again and adding some more support with a screw or zip ties, and then also glued those in place. I actually covered them all with hot glue so there'd be a nice smooth surface so the foam wouldn't tear on it. Here I am with the second mask again, actually test fitting my daughter. Now, after I got all the foam in place, I was sure to add a foamy on top of the foam. I know it seems kind of redundant, but that stuff is way smoother and much more comfortable to have resting against your skin. And don't forget, there's going to be a balaclava to protect the skin also. Here I am cutting out the eyes. And it's not just the eye holes, it's actually the tear ducts, and it's what they call tear duct vision from what I hear. It means I can have my awesome 3D LED eyes and a hole to see out of. And thanks to a disastrous mother mold, the mask came slightly warped out of the mold, so I used a heat gun and shifted things around to try to get things more straight. After adding the eyes, things started to come to life. It was a really exciting step. The next step was to add eyelids. I used this really great stuff. It was an epoxy clay that cures overnight and has, I think, a couple hours of work time. So I really got to play around with it and to give a lot of expression to the eyes. Doing the eyelids was a lot of fun. They helped add a lot of character to the face. My daughter with the blue eyes chose a more girly look with a slight eyelash and cat eye corners. My stepsons, I actually struggled with a little bit because I didn't want to have a too feminine look, and I ended up making a much larger, kind of a downward slope eyelid to help give more of a masculine appearance with kind of a angry look, I guess you could say. Another fun part was using the sculpted clay to make the lower jaw set. I wanted to do an upper jaw set, but I didn't quite have time, and plus, not many people would actually see it. Fun fact, I did not realize I had bought glow-in-the-dark white clay. I had just picked out some off-white clay I thought would look really great. After I was waiting for the lips to cure with the jaw sets open, I realized that when I turned the lights off, something was glowing, and sure enough, it was the teeth. Great little feature, totally didn't mean to do. I was really impressed with how quickly I was able to push out these jaw sets. I was working in the wee hours of the night to get this project done, and I really wish I could have spent more time making them much more realistic. Time was quickly becoming an issue, and I really had to pick and choose where I wanted to put the detail. Doing another test fit with my daughter. With the added weight and jaw set, I wanted to make sure everything fit just fine. Again, I used that amazing epoxy glue to get the elastics to stay in place. I scored a lot of the plastic and had plenty of surface area for attachment to make sure nothing would snap out of place because I needed these to fit tightly so the kids were able to actually activate the jaw with ease. Another part I found a bit more difficult than I actually thought it would be, and it was sizing the ears. I knew they needed to be big because the fur itself would actually kind of dwarf how the ears would look. I was using a long pile, I think it was like 2 to 3 inch pile of fur. To help save on material, I used paper to size everything out, and then I traced it onto foamies and cut it out then. For the large portion of the ears, I used a normal thickness foamy that you can pretty much find anywhere. I had to search a little bit more to be able to find a much thicker foamy that I can use on the inside of the ear to help provide extra support. Using foamies was great. I love the support they provide and also the flexibleness of it. As you can see, I began the foam work around the ears. I didn't feel that I needed to add a whole lot of foam, being I needed both masks to be identical in the pattern making to help speed up the process. So I just focused on the back to help fill out some areas. Later, I did return and redo the eye ridges a bit more because after doing my pattern making, I realized I had lost the eyebrow expression. My daughter still really wanted to have different shaped ears to make hers individual, so that's the only part of the pattern I ended up making separately.
So this is, it's not done yet obviously, but look what she can do with that. She's moving her jaw inside the mask. The eyes on. No. This light might be, they're on. It's just the light's too bright here. There we go. Move your jaw. Oh, that's so cool. Yep. All right, Jasmine. So cool. Yeah, I can't wait to see the fur on it. This thing's gonna be awesome. Talk. This is so wicked.
And after one more little test fit, we started to make the pattern. I used plastic bags and duct tape to help fill out the caul and bib area to help give form to the shape. Plastic wrap was a huge help. It allowed me to have a base to apply my duct tape pattern work without anything sticking. And then as I peeled the pattern back, the duct tape would no longer be sticky and awesome pattern making material. I learned from all my research to work in small pieces of duct tape to help get around the contours. And then I used a Sharpie to help mark out all the pieces that I'd be cutting out. If I was working with different colors, there'd probably be a lot more pattern pieces, but just solid pieces, I just got the basic shape. Here I am making a pattern of just the ear of the other dog so I can have individual looking ears for my daughter's sake. This video right here is more as a reference to figure out where all the pieces go in case I get lost in my cutting fabric, because once this all comes apart, I had no idea if it was going to all line up for me. So having a base reference video ended up being a big help later on. You can see I marked line-up pieces, named pieces, and also have arrows of which way I want the fur to lay. After protecting my desk with a large piece of cardboard, I used a silver marker that showed up well on the black fabric. I could have used chalk, but I was really worried that it might rub away before I was done. As you can see, I went ahead and traced out the shape and then added a seam allowance. This ended up being a big help later on when I went to sew. I pulled out a new blade for this because there was a lot to cut and I wanted a really sharp blade so I didn't have to fight the fabric at all. So safety first. I went ahead and pre-shaved the muzzle area and jaw area so I wouldn't have to worry about all the contours of shaving later on. Using my sister's awesome serger, I found it easier to break everything down into sections and sew those sections together. We had the hood area, which consisted of the back, the temple, and the eyebrows. Then it was the muzzle and the cheeks. Then it was the earpieces. And finally it was the bib area, which consisted of the chin, the neck, and basically the chest. After I completed each section, I made sure I did a test fit onto the mask and then would pin each section together one by one and started sewing them. I ended up breaking a string in the serger, and if you've ever worked with an overlocking or serge machine before, you can tell that this is a complex machine and sometimes it takes a minute to rethread. Even with all my pattern making, I got a little lost along the way and just ended up trying to put pieces onto the mask and pinning it that way and seeing where things would line up correctly. I still would get things wrong occasionally and had to use a seam ripper to take it apart, put it back on. The cheek area especially, I learned that I really needed to direct which area was up, which way was down, and it made the second mask much easier to sew. I took my lessons from the black mask I had just done and omitted some of the pattern numbers. It did not need to be so complicated, and with a little piece of tape I was able to combine some of the pattern pieces to make larger areas to cut out the fur, thus saving a lot of time. Again with the pre-shaving of the muzzle and jaw area. I think it's fun watching the time lapse of the process, how the serge machine works through its paces, and how my little pin cushion acts like a pin ball across my desk. This night in particular was a long night. I kept breaking strings and having rethreading issues. I ended up cleaning and oiling the machine to work much better, but as you can tell, I am super tired. I think Halloween was 2 days away and I really had to bust butt. And of course, when you're up late and you're pushing to get something done, you tend to make more mistakes than you should. And as you can see, I had to use a seam ripper again to get pieces back where they needed to go. Not sure if you can see, but the little black pieces of fabric I'm adding to the white, I did the same thing with the black mask. Those are actually ventilation holes that will be around the ears. I was really worried about my kids overheating because I know Halloweens in the past have been warmer than normal. I was also worried about their ability to hear. While the ventilation chambers did actually help with hearing and would have helped with heat release, it ended up being a very, very snowy Halloween for us. Snowy and wet. I was actually very thankful that the kids were able to stay nice and warm with their fur coats. Just slipping on the fur without doing any of attachment, the mask actually looked pretty scary and I was a little worried, to be honest. But I knew it was going to be okay. I had given myself plenty of extra fabric to work with, so when it came time to fitting, I could simply cut things away. Cutting things away is way easier than adding. Attaching was actually a bit of a struggle. I started off doing the nose, muzzle, and working my way back, but it became evident that I needed to do the ears first so I can actually get up in there and actually put the hot glue. It was really cool that I was able to use pins to pin the fur down to the foam so I could actually see where fabric needed to be pushed around. Despite the rough start of having to figure out how to get the ears into the mask, I was able to actually fold them down and get the ears in that way. Though I did struggle with the fabric for a minute and had to wrestle it into place, with the flexy foamy ears I was able to actually bend them down and slide them in. Shaving the mask was actually quite a bit of fun. It felt like I was actually shaving a real dog. I know that seems kind of silly because this actually holds still for me and real dogs don't. If I was to do this again, I would definitely invest into new pair clippers. These ones both are really old and retired. I would also make sure to get a few more attachments for the blades. Working with only 2 different sizes actually made it a bit of a challenge, and I ended up trying to freehand a little bit with no attachment at all, and it left some areas a little bit more choppy than I'd actually like. And with the old retired blades, it missed a few spots, and I'd have to keep going over the area to finally get it smoothed out, and eventually I basically just ran out of time and just had to say good enough. I really loved working around the eye area. The mask really came to life after I attached the fur.
Here's my lovely wife putting scissors inside of a werewolf's mouth. That seems safe. Look at those eyes. Those are wicked. Look at that. Violet, you gonna make it back there? What's the inside of the mouth look like? Oh! That kind of kills it, doesn't it? A lot of duct tape down there.
Protects everything.
As with any clippers, make sure you clean them really well and oil them between use. You don't want to get the wrong color strands of hair mixed up with another color, and you want your clippers to last as long as possible. That's how my retired clippers here lasted forever, even though I really think I should get some new ones. You can see my family in the background. They're all very excited to see this project almost done. In the wee hours of the night, I decided to airbrush the mask to help bring out some definitions. Now, I'm an extreme novice with an airbrush and haven't had a chance to play around with it very much, and I'm afraid that my lack of ability shows a bit, and this mask kind of suffered a little bit for it. Now you can see that I'm adding the actual lip. Now, the lip on the bottom is made with the same stuff I used for the eyes and could actually hide the seam a little bit better with the fur. And here is the end result with finish. I loved doing this project. I learned so much. The only thing I could wish is I had more time. I feel I could accomplish so much more. The time-saving decisions I did make, though, I believe were really smart, and I still ended up with a great product. After everything was all said and done, being that Halloween was at night and my kids were inexperienced fursuiters, we decided not to add a see-through fabric for the tear bucks and just leave the space open.
Okay, see the tail? Talk. Wow, that's cool. Oh, you dropped your tail. All right, let's see the mask. Get closer. Look up. Look up. Wow, that's awesome. All right, David, getting your suit up. Your suit up. Whatever. Ignore the commentary. You getting ready? There's Jasmine putting hers on. There's little Violet putting her new makeshift outfit on. Because we didn't like SpongeBob, did we? There's one mask. Uh-oh. We're putting another one on here. And we are here at the Old Eagles parking lot, which is now literally just one big parking lot. Awaiting the parade. All right. Both kids are ready. You guys ready for the parade? We got to say something. Yeah. All right. Violet, look at you. Let me see your tail. You got a tail back there? Hers does. Good job. All right.